Picture this. It's October 2015.
Okay.
You were in a brightly lit, sterile white conference room in Midtown Manhattan. And standing in front of a long table of executives is a 20-year-old woman. And she is weeping.
Wow.
Yeah, she's practically collapsing to the floor. And this isn't just anybody, by the way. This is Gigi Hadid.
Oh, right.
She's already a highly successful model, right? She's worked with Chanel. She's graced the pages of Vogue. But in this specific moment, she is crying tears of sheer, overwhelming relief. Because an executive named Ed Rezek just asked her what she's doing on November 9th and 10th.
He cast her.
He just cast her in the Victoria's Secret fashion show.
Which, I mean, for a massive generation of women coming of age in the 1990s and 2000s, that runway was the absolute zenith.
Oh, totally.
Getting those wings wasn't just, another booking. It was the ultimate validation of beauty, of power, and cultural relevance. If you walked that stage, you were officially the pinnacle of the cultural zeitgeist.
And it was this glittering, multi-billion-dollar pop culture institution.
Yeah.
We had millions of people tuning in, diamonds, feathers, live musical performances.
Yeah.
But what is so wild, and the reason we are diving into the sources today, primarily the book Selling Sexy, is how unexpected the origin of this brand actually is.
It really is.
Because Victoria's Secret didn't start on a catwalk. It started in the 1970s in the seedy red light district of Times Square with a husband running an errand to buy his wife a vibrator.
It's quite the origin story. And our mission today is to unpack how that single, taboo retail errand transformed the way an entire culture views the very concept of sexy.
Yeah.
We are going to explore the cutthroat business maneuvers that built the modern American mall, and we'll reveal the surprising, sometimes deeply tragic human stories behind this iconic empire.
So whether you are fascinated by marketing psychology, the history of pop culture, or just, brilliant, ruthless business strategy, this deep dive offers a masterclass in how a brand can manufacture a fantasy and then sell it to the masses. But to understand how Victoria's Secret defined the 1990s, we really have to look at what shopping for intimacy actually looked like back in the 1970s.
Right. And if you were shopping back then, the landscape was bleak.
Yeah.
You have to imagine Roy Raymond. He's a mild-mannered, somewhat preppy marketing executive living in New York. And his wife, Gay was a physical therapist, and she used vibrators to soothe her patients' aching backs.
Right, for medical use.
Exactly. So one day, she asks Roy to pick one up for her practice. And Roy, wearing his respectable business suit, has to venture into Times Square.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and in the early 70s, this wasn't the tourist hub it is today.
No, not at all.
It was full of peep shows, porn theaters, and these sketchy, dimly lit sex shops.
I can just picture this guy in a suit nervously looking over his shoulder.
Totally.
But the sources point out that Roy isn't just scandalized by this. He's an entrepreneur. He's looking around this environment, and his brain immediately identifies a massive white space in the market.
He sees an opportunity.
Right. He realizes that women are starting to explore their sexuality, but to do so, they are forced into these uncomfortable, shady environments. And he thinks, well, why not take these taboo products and make them respectable?
And that realization leads directly to Roy and Gay's first venture, which they ran out of San Francisco. It was called the Xandria Collection.
Which was a mail-order business, right?
Exactly. A mail-order catalog for sex toys, but designed to look incredibly discreet and high-end.
Oh, smart.
It was a huge success, particularly in conservative parts of the country where privacy was just paramount. And the profits from Xandria gave Roy the capital to target an even bigger gap in the market. Lingerie.
Which brings us to a much-needed crash course in the history of underwear.
Yes, let's do it.
Because if you look at the historical context provided in the sources, for centuries, undergarments were basically tools for physical manipulation.
They were.
You had the corsets of the 16th century. Like, at one point, Catherine de' Medici dictated that a fashionable waist should be exactly 13 inches.
13 inches.
Yes. We're talking about garments so restrictive that historical medical records show women's ribs literally overlapping.
It was a literal cage.
Yeah.
And that restriction held for centuries. It communicated a family's wealth and a woman's moral virtue through sheer physical compression.
Right.
It really wasn't until the 1920s that things shifted. You had the rise of fast dances like the tango, more women entering the workforce. So flappers embraced the early brassiere simply because they needed freedom of movement.
But that freedom didn't last long, did it?
No, it didn't. By the 1950s, after Christian Dior's new look swept the fashion world, extreme curves were back, which led to those pointy, rigid, conical bullet bras of the post-war era.
Which brings us to the mid-20th century. If you wanted something that was actually marketed as sexy back then, you really only had one option. Fredericks of Hollywood.
Oh, Fredericks.
Yeah, founded by Frederick Mellinger in 1946. And it was heavily influenced by World War II pinup girls.
Yeah.
The sources note that Mellinger actually polled his army buddies to see what they wanted women to wear.
Because it was entirely constructed around the male gaze.
100%.
He was selling things like inflatable bras with tiny straws, crotchless panties, literal jars of orgy butter.
Orgy butter. I mean,
It was loud, it was neon, and very much geared toward marital seduction from a male perspective. And if a woman didn't want to shop there, her only alternative was the local department store.
Right.
Where basic beige gummy underwear was just piled haphazardly on tables under harsh fluorescent lights.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because this exact contrast is where Roy Raymond's genius really shines. If Fredericks of Hollywood was like a loud neon dive bar catering entirely to men.
Then Raymond treated lingerie like a high-end, exclusive speakeasy.
Exactly. In 1977, he opens the very first Victoria's Secret store in Palo Alto, California. And he designs it to look like a Victorian boudoir.
Right.
You walk in, and there are dusty rose walls, plush oriental rugs, antique Eastlake furniture. He stocks it with delicate silks and expensive designer pieces. Sometimes a single robe would cost $2,000.
Wow.
He created a physical space where women could feel safe, elegant, and comfortable, exploring the post-1960s sexual revolution.
What's fascinating here is how accurately Raymond recognized a massive societal shift.
Yeah.
Second-wave feminism was bringing women into the workforce in record numbers. They were earning their own paychecks, and for the first time, they had their own disposable income to spend on self-indulgence.
Didn't have to ask for allowance.
Exactly. They were reclaiming their femininity on their own terms. It wasn't about performing for a man. It was about the private, romantic indulgence of self-care.
It's such a brilliant cultural instinct. But having a great instinct doesn't mean you know how to run a profitable business.
No, it does not.
Raymond had terrible financial discipline. He was spending wildly, dropping $1 million per store just on antique wood fixtures and velvet drapes.
That's incredible.
So by 1982, Victoria's Secret was hemorrhaging cash and on the brink of bankruptcy. And that vulnerability opens the door for a retail titan who understood the sheer mathematics of shopping better than almost anyone else.
Les Wexner. Right. Les Wexner is a pivotal figure here. He was the billionaire founder of a store called The Limited, based out of Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah.
Wexner wasn't a designer. He didn't care about the romance of fashion. He was a merchant. Early on, in 1962, he realized that instead of paying a premium to buy designer brands out of New York, he could bypass the middlemen entirely.
Just cut them right out.
Exactly. He could create white label garments, essentially making his own generic clothes, slapping his own store's label on them, and selling them at a massive markup.
And he puts this idea on steroids when he meets a man named Marty Trust in the 1970s.
Yes.
Trust ran a company called Mast Industries out of Hong Kong.
Right.
Now, to understand why this matters, you have to look at how retail normally worked. The standard American retail cycle took 6 months.
Right.
You ordered a sweater from 7th Avenue, the fabric was sourced, it was shipped somewhere to be cut, shipped somewhere else to be sewn, loaded onto a boat, and half a year later, it arrived in your store.
And that waiting period was the bane of the retail industry. Trends would be over by the time the clothes arrived, but Marty Trust had built a vertically integrated network of factories in Asia.
Wait, so he owned the whole process?
He owned every step of the process under one roof. The spinning, the dyeing, the cutting, the sewing, it all happened in one continuous loop. By partnering with Trust, Wexner compressed that 6-month manufacturing cycle down to just 30 days.
That is insane.
They essentially created the blueprint for what we now call fast fashion.
The results detailed in the sources are just staggering. Take the Fernandez sweater, for example. Wexner's team notices that European brands like Benetton are gaining traction in the U.S.
Right.
So they design a basic shaker knit sweater, give it a completely fake Italian name Forenza, market it with the tagline, "Finally in America," and manufacture it for pennies in Hong Kong.
They sold 3 million of those fake Italian sweaters in the first year alone.
Wait, hold on. So they just made up an Italian-sounding word, slapped it on a cheap sweater from Hong Kong, and millions of people bought into the illusion.
Precisely. And they did it again with the Outback Red Safari line.
Oh, yeah.
They literally just bought garments off the rack from Banana Republic, tweaked the pockets slightly, sent the specs to Asia, and had hundreds of thousands of copycat units in their stores in a matter of weeks.
Wow.
It was ruthless, unprecedented efficiency.
So cut to 1982. Wexner walks into a Victoria's Secret store. He doesn't care about the expensive Victorian antiques, but he sees the core concept, and more importantly, he sees their mail-order customer list.
The catalog list.
Yes. So he buys the entire company from a desperate Roy Raymond for a mere $1 million in stock.
And the very first thing he does is strip it down.
Right.
He throws out the expensive antiques. He replaces the $2,000 designer silks with cheaper, mass-produced lingerie made by mass industries in Hong Kong.
Making it accessible.
Yes, he drops the prices so everyday middle-class America can actually afford it.
But, reading through the sources, it really makes me wonder, was Wexner actually a visionary or just the ultimate industrializer of taste? Because he actively instructed his team not to invent. His exact mandate to his executives was, be a fast second.
That's a great distinction. I would argue his true genius was his patterning strategy.
Patterning.
Yeah. He didn't need the creative burden of predicting the future of fashion. He just needed a supply chain so ruthlessly efficient that he could instantly mass produce whatever someone else had just proved was cool.
Right.
He was a visionary of infrastructure, not design.
And a huge piece of that infrastructure was the booming American mall. With the Asian supply chain perfected, Wexner had the product. Now he needed distribution.
Right.
So he became incredibly close with a developer named A. Alfred Taubman, who was one of the pioneers of the indoor shopping mall. And Taubman didn't just build buildings, he designed controlled utopias.
The psychological manipulation of space that Taubman used is just fascinating.
Oh, it's wild.
He instituted the 3-block rule based on data showing that shoppers won't walk further than 3 city blocks without a stopping point to rest or buy food.
That makes so much sense.
And he also obsessed over flooring. He used terrazzo tiles instead of hard concrete because he calculated they offered just enough give to cause less foot fatigue for women wearing thin-soled shoes.
Think about that for a second. Next time you walk into a mega mall, look at the floors. They specifically engineered the ground you walk on so you wouldn't physically feel how long you had been shopping.
It's brilliant, but yeah.
That is almost sinister. He even angled the parking lots, right?
He did. He sloped the parking lot slightly so that when you walked toward the mall entrances, you were always walking downhill.
No way.
Yes. It made the physical act of entering the mall feel entirely effortless.
So Wexner conquers the physical world through these optimized psychological mall spaces. But Victoria's Secret conquered the psychological world of the consumer through their secret weapon, the catalog. Now, initially, Wexner actually hated the Victoria's Secret catalog. It was operating at a loss, and he threatened to shut the whole thing down. But an executive named Cindy Fetus Fields steps in and completely revolutionizes it.
Fetus Fields realized the catalog couldn't be run by fashion designers. It had to be run by mathematicians.
Yeah.
She implemented a strict data-driven merchandising formula. Instead of just picking pretty pictures, she analyzed past sales data with ruthless precision.
Everything was calculated.
Exactly. If a $20 pink silk teddy generated a specific profit margin in the spring, her formula dictated exactly how many square inches of page space and exactly what placement that item earned in the summer book. It wasn't about aesthetics. It was pure math.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because to hit Wexner's massive revenue goals, they needed middle America to buy more underwear than they ever had before.
Right.
So they'd completely fabricated a new brand identity. They pivoted away from the softer, slightly racier look of the 1980s catalog, and they adopted this highly refined, aristocratic English aesthetic. A marketer named Joanna Felder was brought in, and she literally wrote a biographical novella for a fictional woman named Victoria Stewart White.
The level of detail was absurd.
It really was.
Victoria wasn't just a name. According to their internal brand Bible, she was half French, half English. She had a barrister husband named Thomas. She owned a quaint little lingerie shop in London. She spent her weekends sunbathing topless in St. Bart's and sailing on her 52-foot schooner. Keep in mind, this woman did not exist.
It's almost like scrolling through the Instagram feed of a lifestyle influencer.
Exactly. Long before social media, this catalog arrived in millions of mailboxes. And you weren't just buying the bra, you were buying the lifestyle of the fictional influencer wearing it. They were doing influencer marketing through the Postal Service.
And everyday middle-class America could buy a piece of that elite aristocratic fantasy for the price of $20.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the absolute genius here was selling the idea of aristocratic luxury using the exact same mass market, data-driven algorithms used to sell groceries. Wow.
They stripped away the expensive reality of high fashion and sold the accessible illusion of it. And it worked flawlessly. By 1994, the catalog alone was generating over $500 million a year.
So they built this massive, highly profitable English illusion. It's making $500 million a year. It's safe, it's refined. So what breaks it?
Right, what changes?
Well, 1994 is the year a massive threat arrives from overseas, forcing Victoria's Secret to abandon subtlety entirely and invent the loudest, most televised version of sexy the world had ever seen.
The threat was the Wonder Bra.
Yes.
It launched in the U.S. with a massive billboard campaign featuring model Eva Herzigova staring down at her heavily enhanced cleavage with a simple, provocative tagline, "Hello, boys?"
I remember those.
It was a global sensation. Traffic literally stopped in front of these billboards. It completely eclipsed Victoria's Secret's own push-up bra, the Miracle Bra.
Yeah, and Victoria's Secret is getting mocked in the press for being too quiet, too refined. So CEO Grace Nichols and marketing head Ed Razek orchestrated a counterattack.
They had to. They realized print catalogs and mailboxes just weren't enough anymore. They needed a spectacle that couldn't be ignored. So in 1995, they staged their first live runway show at the Plaza Hotel in New York.
And the audience choice was very deliberate.
It was.
This wasn't for the fashion press or Vogue editors. They simulcast the event on a massive screen in Times Square, and the audience sitting inside the plaza was mostly Wall Street men smoking cigars.
Oh, great.
It was a noisy, aggressive hijacking of the cultural conversation. They were declaring that they owned the concept of sexy.
And that aggressive pivot leads directly to the birth of the Angels in 1997.
Yes.
The sources mentioned they were inspired by a famous Herb Ritts photograph of the 90s supermodels. They hire Ritts to direct a Super Bowl-style television commercial. They put models like Tyra Banks and Stephanie Seymour in these fluffy white feathered wings, have Tom Jones singing in the background, and it becomes a smash hit.
Huge.
The next year, the wings hit the runway. They introduced the Fantasy Bra, a literal $1 million diamond-encrusted bra modeled by Claudia Schiffer.
The brand had reached the stratosphere. Les Wexner was generating billions. He was even building his own literal town in Ohio, a planned community called New Albany.
Yeah, his own town.
Effectively reigning over a $7 billion empire. But as we read through the sources, we are also forced to look closely at the dark realities running parallel to this soaring corporate success.
Yes, the contrast presented in the text is really jarring. First, there's the fate of the original founder, Roy Raymond.
Right.
After selling Victoria's Secret to Wexner for that $1 million in stock, Raymond tried to start a high-end children's store. But he still didn't have the business mechanics down, and he went bankrupt.
It's so sad.
He lost his home, his marriage ended, and tragically in 1993, he died by suicide, jumping from the Golden Gate Bridge. As the brand soared, his name was largely erased from the corporate mythology of the company he built.
And the text also details a disturbing shadow cast over the Wexner empire by a man named Jeffrey Epstein. According to the sources, Epstein served as Wexner's close financial advisor for nearly 20 years. During this time, Epstein managed much of Wexner's personal fortune. The text reports that Epstein used his access to this immense power and wealth to pose as a Victoria's Secret recruiter, exploiting and trafficking young women.
Wow.
And it is also noted in the sources that Wexner has publicly denied having any knowledge of Epstein's crimes during their association.
So what does this all mean? We have this bizarre juxtaposition. You have an empire generating billions using data algorithms to dictate global beauty standards. But the original founder meets a tragic end. These dark elements operate in the background, and the brand itself becomes completely untethered from its original goal.
Exactly.
Roy Raymond built that first store with the dusty rose walls to empower women to feel safe and comfortable in their own bedrooms. By the time of the Angels, the brand's culture was something else entirely.
This raises an important question about intent versus outcome. The brand pivoted from intimate self-care to performative sexuality.
Performative, exactly.
The angels weren't designed to make everyday women feel comfortable with themselves. They were designed to be a pop culture spectacle. They were a broadcast standard of absolute perfection, optimized to capture attention.
It's an incredible arc to look back on. This company was born from a husband's desire to remove the shame of buying intimacy in the 1970s. It was then transformed by a Midwestern supply chain genius who understood vertical integration into a monolithic, inescapable definer of beauty.
It really was inescapable for a while.
But as we saw at the very beginning with Gigi Hadid in 2015, by the time she walked that stage, the culture was already shifting. Women were beginning to view this highly manufactured, singular version of sexy not as an aspiration, but as an exhausted relic.
The illusion was finally breaking, and I think for anyone listening, there is a profound takeaway here about the architecture of desire. Look at the brands you interact with today. Look at what you buy, what you wear, what you deem fashionable. How much of what you consider your own personal unique taste is actually the result of rigorous patterning, 30-day supply chains, and data-driven algorithms predicting exactly what will make you pull out your credit card?
It definitely makes you wonder who is really in control of your closet. We talked earlier about how physical corsets squeezed and shaped women's bodies for centuries, literally altering their rib cages to fit a societal ideal of beauty.
Right.
It leaves you with this lingering thought. Did Victoria's Secret actually liberate women by bringing lingerie out of the shadows and into the bright lights of the mainstream mall? Or did it simply replace the physical corset with a psychological one, broadcasting an impossible televised standard of perfection that an entire generation of women felt forced to fit into?